I'm just going to give everybody a few minutes or a few seconds to kind of drop in. Give everyone a chance to get up to speed and come on back. They may have forgotten of what today is. All right, that should be enough time. Let's get this show on the road. Let's get this party started. Welcome, tech artists from around the world and tech art fans. Greetings. It is Friday, and it is 12:30. At least it's 12:30 Eastern Time. And it is time for another episode of Tech Art Talk Live. My name is Chris, and I am going to be your host for today's episode. Now, before we had our little break here, we were talking about the various types of visual effects. We gave an introduction to visual effects. We talked about in-camera visual effects. We talked about in-material visual effects. We talked about simulations, and we talked about particles. But the thing we didn't talk about is where visual effects are going into the near future. And that is what today's lecture is going to be all about. And there aren't a lot of graphics, and it's not a lot of visuals today, just because I really didn't have the time to actually pull everything together. But it's actually will be one of our shorter presentations. So hang on tight and get ready to rock and roll, because we are going to show what we can about Chris's prognostications about the future. Okay, so let me get this going here. So, what are the next big trends of visual effects? Where is it all going? Now, I've said this many times before, but it's an amazing time to be in visual effects. Now, computers are increasing in power. It seems like they're increasing, but regretfully, it seems like they're able to create more art with less technology and know-how. And these are kind of like my guesses, and the guesses are not based on fact. No, I'm sorry, folks. I didn't do my research on this. I could be totally wrong on this. I am just going on by what I've seen going on in the industry and based on the trends that I've experienced going on in the industry. I'm actually pretty good at putting my finger on the pulse of where things are going. Now, if they're already there, well, it could be the case. Don't know. I'm not that really informed on current events. Ask anyone who knows things. But I do know where I do have a general feel of where things are going. So I'm feeling very confident that my guesses about the future are probably pretty accurate. And one of the big events that's going on that's kind of motivating things is that Moore's Law is ending. I mean, everyone thought that computers were going to just double in speed every year, and it's going to keep on going. But regretfully, it is coming to a well-oiled halt. And that is causing computer manufacturers and GPU manufacturers to think a little bit more cleverly and to think a little bit more outside the box. And you're going to start to see some very interesting new inventions coming along. Now, there are huge leaps inside of technology, and even though that Moore's Law is coming to an end, there are still huge advances in the technology, and a lot of it is coming from the way that we organize the data. And continuing amount is going to be about how we can continue to make tools and apps easier for people to go. And so they're going to use, especially in the realm of visual effects. Visual effects has increased incredible amounts in the interface design. It's actually, there's a lot of stuff really going on. And so there's a lot of stuff that is currently evolving that was once only available to the eggheads, or I shouldn't say the eggheads, like the really, really smart folks. And it's now being reduced down to an interface that's easy to use. And so this is where real things are coming along. Now, an example of this is real-time ray tracing. Now, back in the 80s, I had no idea that real-time ray tracing was going to happen. In fact, I thought I was going to pretty much die without seeing real-time ray tracing. And lo and behold, we are on the cusp of real-time ray tracing. And why is not necessarily just because of faster machines, but because of faster thought process, of a better interface design, and a better understanding of how to manipulate and organize the existing machinery in a way that is most effective for this. So remember, this is all about visual effects, right? Now, visual effects is really important because nobody wants a visual effect that's been used before. Nobody wants a recycled visual effect. Nobody likes canned visual effects. All clients want brand new visual effects. And so they're going to do whatever they can to get the best quality and the newest stuff. And so if you want to really start creating that new avant-garde, the new cutting edge, you're going to need to understand a little bit of technology. However, the way that technology is going, the evolution of getting the tools that was once only belonged to mad scientists is now getting faster and faster, and it's moving into the hands of artists faster and faster. And so that's why I think that what I'm about to present today is probably going to happen probably within the next 5 to 10 years. It might be a little bit longer, but who knows? But basically I see 3 big areas of visual effects evolving over the next current time frame over the next 10 years. And the first of that is rendering and ray tracing. And then we're going to start dealing with artificial intelligence. And then we're going to deal with virtual and augmented reality. Now, everyone knows about these things, but I want to express about how visual effects is going to be impacted by all of these. So let's start off first with good old ray tracing. Yeah, that thing that I thought would never happen in real time, but it's happening. Well, guess what? It's here. I kind of got caught with my pants down. I didn't think it was ever going to happen, but it is definitely here. So what are we using ray tracing for? Well, we're using it for shadow generation. We're using it for reflections. We're using it for refractions. We're using it for ambient occlusion, depth of field, motion blur, atmospherics, caustics, and collision detection. I don't know about you folks, but that sounds a lot like a lot of visual effects to me. Those are what used to be called visual effects back in the 80s and the 90s, but have since come as second nature. So these actually are here right now. Visual effects is part of the ray tracing revolution. Now, where's this all going? Now, keep a look at where the money's going and watch what Unreal Engine 5 is going towards, and look at where NVIDIA is going. And they're going to pretty much tell you where things are going. Now, I haven't really had a chance to really understand Nanite and Lumen yet. And so that's on my list of things to do, is to really get down and study these things and really understand them. But look at what's going on with NVIDIA. NVIDIA's got this new Pascal architecture, and it replaced their old architecture, and it's kind of configured differently. They've got this thing called an RT core in it, and that means a quarter of the entire GPU is devoted to nothing but the optimization of BVH traversal. What does that mean? Well, that just means ray triangle intersection. That means NVIDIA has now bet 25% of its entire future is going to lie exclusively just in ray tracing. If that doesn't tell you that we are going towards ray tracing, I don't know what is, because if NVIDIA and Nanite and Lumen are kind of like hedging towards this concept of or towards ray tracing, I think this is going towards full ray tracing. Now today, rasterizing is still the key rendering type of algorithm. We have to deal with the rasterizer. We're still dealing with the 7 stages of the rasterizing pipeline. Now that is the normal. Now that's what's going on. Now if there are any ray tracing, where is it used? In the visual effects of exactly what we saw. It's being used for shadows, it's being used for reflections and refractions, it's used for atmospherics and caustics and motion blurs. Now tomorrow, which I don't know when it's going to happen. It all depends on how well this stuff evolves. But I believe full ray tracing is going to be on the head. That means we're going to abandon the rasterizing pipeline and go on towards full ray tracing. And it all has to do with the way that programs like Nanite and Lumen are handling millions and millions of polygons, billions of polygons. In other words, what we're involving with is going to be involving with ray marching and volumetrics. I am so jazzed about ray marching. Watch out in not next week, and probably not the week after that, because it's probably going to take me about 2 weeks to get through all the physics that tech artists need. But I want to present a series on how to create ray marching and volumetrics inside modern rendering engines. Now this is like, I really am so bullish on ray marching. I really believe that this is where the future is going, towards full ray tracing. And that means that we are going to have ray tracing and visual effects coming out the wazoo. This is going to be full-time going on. And so we mentioned this before, and part of this is kind of connected to ray tracing, because this is kind of like a byproduct of ray tracing, believe it or not. But artificial intelligence is here, and it's being used among us. It's being used in ray tracing. Now, artificial intelligence is going to be, this is like deep learning and machine learning, and this is going to be used into different CGI fields at different rates. Now, it is here right now in rendering. That means ray tracing. It's being used right now in ray tracing. I think where it's going to start hitting first, and it's going to start hitting hard, is inside character rigging, and it's going to be hitting inside animation. In fact, it's being used for these topics right now in the minds and in the computers of the most nutty, mad scientists. And this is really, really, really exciting stuff. Now, what is AI kind of like used for? It's used for like classifying voices, faces, animals, genealogy. But what riggers and animators are currently using it for, now these are the high-tech, research. We're going to put you down in the basement, and we're going to give you the world's hardest problems, and we're not going to let you out until you solve your problem. We're going to throw you Cheetos and Pepsi until you figured out the problems, right? Okay, so what they're doing is they're doing things like performance analysis and behavioral conditioning and so forth in order to figure out the rigs and the animations. So AI and rendering, what's going on with this? Well, we mentioned this before. It's ray tracing. And this is not the future. This is here, folks. This is what's going on right now. Now, remember I told you about the NVIDIA with the Pascal architecture? And then we had that 25% of it was devoted just to ray tracing. Well, 25% of it also is devoted to nothing but AI, which is devoted towards ray trace denoising. Ray tracing by itself can be a very noisy algorithm, and it creates a lot of stuff, and you really got to pump a zillion buku rays into a scene in order to get it to look good. But with denoising and AI telling the renderer what looks good and identifying what the scene is supposed to look like, it's going to go and make things much faster. And so instead of just putting in a bajillion rays for a ray trace for every pixel, you can do one or two, and then the CPU is going to use AI and denoising techniques in order to fill in all the places for you. So that's really exciting, and that's really unbelievable. I would have never thought to do this. And in fact, it's my hunch that in reality, NVIDIA is now Skynet. In the pursuance of real-time ray tracing, they have become the AI powerhouse of the universe, and they are, the company in charge of everything. And it's a little bit scary of where everything is going. All right, so what about rigging and animation? Well, let's look at rigging first. Rigging is, all about creating puppets to life. And so AI is then being used in biometrically to place joints in the ideal locations, like to try to duplicate evolution. It's weird, but they obviously AI is being used to place the joints inside of characters right now so that they are optimally driven. And then, using procedural rigging techniques, it implements the controls in order to control this, in order to provide that. And so therefore, what is the role of the rigger in the future? AI isn't going to be replacing rigging in the future. What AI is going to be doing is becoming a tool for the rigger. It's going to be a very fancy tool because the rigger now has to teach the AI what looks good and what's realistic. The AI doesn't know what looks good. Only humans understand what looks good. And we can try to teach, by showing the AI 1,000,001 examples of what good looks like, they still don't know what good looks like until we actually have to guide it. And so therefore the riggers of tomorrow are going to take on more of a teaching role of where they're going to be teaching AI how to rig properly. And the same thing has to go with animation. Now the AI is already driving organic locomotion and inverse kinematics. It's people, the mad scientists, the mad animators are already doing this. And so therefore, in the near future, what's going to happen is the animators are going to take on more of a role of a director, kind of like a big film director, instead of motion creators. They're going to be guiding the AI in order to improve their performances. And so they're going to become basically QA for animation and for motion. So what about visual effects? Well, think about where AI is being used for those other areas. Well, we know that visual effects complement the story and the gameplay. And without the story and without the gameplay, visual effects aren't really anything. They impact the mood and the tone of the experience. That's the role of a visual effect. And visual effects are a huge influencer towards that mood and the tone. But what about AI recognizing human emotion? Impacting the human experience? Does that really happen? Well, I don't know how long this is going to take for the AI to evolve towards understanding human emotion and interpreting it. But when that does happen, what's going to happen is that the visual effects artists are going to create visual effects. They're not going to. The AI is going to start doing that. But the visual effects are going to become easier to control. The interfaces are going to be easier to manipulate. The visual effects artists are going to become, kind of like teachers, once again, kind of like the animators, kind of like the riggers, and they're going to teach the system of what good looks like. They're going to teach the AI what's going wrong. They assume the role of emotion directors, if you will, where they're going to use to tweak the experience, and they're going to use AI in order to kind of dial in the exact emotional response. And in fact, kind of wacky, I'm going to say that visual effects artists in the future are going to become the emotional QA of immersive experiences. Okay, so does that mean that the role of visual effects are going away? The visual effects artist? No, it can't happen, because we mentioned at the beginning of this part of this segment that nobody wants a duplicated visual effect. Nobody wants a rehashed or recycled visual effects. And AI isn't smart enough to improvise on the rendering pipeline, or at least, not for a very long time. All right, so tech artists and graphical programs are still responsible for inventing real-time systems, meaning like the rendering and the visual effects and the wild, wacky nuttiness that's coming out of here, like for rendering volumetrics and all so forth, and the ray marching. We as humans have to create all that stuff. That's not, AI can't invent that. So if you really want to understand, continue working on the tough stuff, then yeah, you're not off the hook. The computer's not going to replace your job. You're going to have to kind of dig in there, study your math, study your physics, get in there and really understand and deal with the rendering pipeline. And then you'll become more of, rather than a tool user, you become a tool director, or you're guiding the direction of the tools of the future. Okay, so one last thing. What about virtual and augmented reality? Now, this is kind of nutty, because real-time visual effects, as being used for film and video games, well, actually, they don't use visual effects real time in film, but they do use them for video games, for sure. But visual effects are now being used in other areas because it's being used in architecture, it's being used in automotive and transportation, it's being used in education, medicine, communication, and location based entertainment. And so you notice now that I kind of say real time visual effects are being used in film and video games. And that's kind of like I see this where what we are talking about are immersive transmedia experiences. And visual effects is no longer going to be able to differentiate between real time and offline. They're going to start emerging altogether because of this whole evolution of immersive transmedia experiences, or what I call ITXs. Okay, so ITXs are everywhere. Immersive transmedia, they influence every aspect of what it means to be a human being right now. That means today they are element in all print media and all display devices. You can't get away without some kind of immersive transmedia experience trying to influence how you perceive any kind of print media and so forth. And I know that AI and virtual and augmented reality, these items, they're just kind of brand new. They're just kind of, they're just kind of burning. They're not dead. They're a little quiet right now, but that's because they're really working on really big things. And I think the second and third generations of AR and VR are really going to blow people's socks away. And they're going to get really exciting. Because why? Because they're going to become part of the role of storytelling. Now, this is what immersive transmedia experiences are all about. Storytelling is a human experience. This is kind of like, this defines who we are, what it means to be human. And it's all about storytelling. And we're able to abstractly project ourselves within characters and experience reality through other characters and so forth. I have no idea why that happened. I never get a phone call. But anyway, immersive transmedia experiences are evolving into pure experiential storytelling. And why? Well, basically, they're being used to help manipulate us on a market-driven economy. And that means they're trying to sell stuff to us, honestly. But it's everywhere about it. And we as humans, do we think logically? No. We like to think we think logically, but we think by emotion. And what do we talk about earlier? What is the biggest influencer of emotion? Visual effects. Visual effects are a crucial tool for guiding the mood and the tone of immersive transmedia experiences. So that's right, visual effects are kind of like the part of an important essence of really defining of what the next human experience is being, because visual effects are being used to manipulate our emotions right now. So what's the role of the visual effects creator? Well, visual effects are used for making alternative realities feel real. So visual effects are going to be crucial for creating alternative realities, and which are going to be essential for things like training and education. You've got journalism, medicine, legal elements are motion-driven environments, and which means is that they're going to rely very, very heavily on visual effects. And VR and AR are just essential for improving and helping out aid the interpersonal communication in a shut-in society. So that means is that, right now we're going through this pandemic, and now we realize that people are working from home right now, but people, as we are as human beings, just as we enjoy stories, we enjoy interacting with each other. And so AR and VR are going to be essential tools in the near future for, even though we have separated ourselves from each other, they're going to be essential components for helping human beings keeping in contact with each other. And so therefore, visual effects is going to be the most important component inside of this new media in creating immersive storytelling for everyone. All right, and I realize that last segment about VR and AR is mostly theoretical because I was talking about the human condition. But I really think that this is going to have a profound impact of the way things are going. Okay, great. Now that is what I wanted to cover with today's topic. And so, if you like what you saw, come and check me out next week, on Tech Art Talk Live, and that's going to be the 18th of June. And go check us out we're going to give probably 2 weeks worth of Tech Art Physics. And I think it's going to take me a little bit of time to kind of go into explain how everything is Newtonian physics and ultimately what the simulation loop is that most simulation engines are going through. So that's going to take me a little bit while to get through all that. But so anticipate 2 lectures onto that. All right. Now, if you like what you saw today, go ahead and subscribe to me on YouTube. My name is Chris Rhoda. And check me out on Facebook and on LinkedIn. Or check out TechArt EDU, which are also on Facebook and LinkedIn. And you can subscribe to us on all of that. And if you really want to kind of help me, come on and check out the techartedu.com website. And there's going to be a little adopt in, kind of like a little button there where you can press the button and then you can leave your name and your email address, and then you'll get information as soon as things start evolving. Now, I've been working very hard lately on getting the visual effects for tech artists out the door. Things are getting close. I actually have a small army of artists helping me out with the visual effects images. Thank you, gang, for doing an outstanding job. I'm really excited where you're going, and I'm really proud of the content that you're creating, so thank you very much. So anyway, that's going to be what's going on. And if you want updates on what's going on with TechArt EDU and all the other nutty stuff going on with me and the rest of the gang here, come on by and check it out and leave your address, and we'll make sure that you get informed as things are happening. Well, thank you very much for joining me today and allowing me to guess about what's going to happen into the future. We'll have to wait and see what happens. I hope you'll be there to join it with me as we explore into these new ends. And until next week, where we start talking about physics, have a great week, and arrivederci.